The scariest sound isn't a scream in the dark. It's the silence that follows when a train, packed with people just moments ago, grinds to a halt in the middle of nowhere, and you realize you are completely, utterly alone. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story is a chilling reminder that the most routine journey can twist into your worst nightmare. It's a tale of isolation, unseen threats, and the primal fear of being followed. Remember, sometimes the danger isn't what you see, but what you feel watching you from the shadows. This is the story of Amelia and her ride on the 11:45 Express. The gentle rhythmic clack-clack of the train wheels on the tracks was a lullaby Amelia desperately needed. After a 14-hour day that involved 2 failed presentations, a spilled latte on her white blouse, and a missed team dinner, all she wanted was the sanctity of her own bed. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, her eyes closed, letting the wind from the slightly open vent whip through her loose brown hair. It was the last express from downtown Chicago to the sleepy suburb of Oakwood, and the day's exhaustion had seeped deep into her bones. She remembered the frantic rush to the station, her heels clicking a frantic tattoo on the marble floor, the whoosh of the closing doors as she barely slipped into the ladies' coach. It had been sparsely populated then, a businesswoman furiously typing on a laptop, a young mother soothing a fussy baby, and a few other solitary figures lost in their phones. But one by one, like leaves falling from a tree, they had disembarked. Ravenswood, then Jefferson Park, then Elmhurst. With each stop, the coach grew quieter, the ambient noise reducing to just the train's own mechanical symphony. Amelia had drifted in that pleasant, semi-conscious state between waking and sleeping, lulled by the motion. That's why the sound was so violently intrusive. It wasn't the scheduled gentle deceleration for a station. It was a harsh metallic shriek of brakes grinding against steel, a jarring lurch that threw her forward against her seatbelt. Her eyes flew open, her heart immediately seizing in her chest. The world outside her window was not the familiar glow of a station platform. It was a void, a landscape of industrial decay swallowed by the moonless night. She could make out the skeletal outlines of abandoned warehouses and the hulking shadows of dormant machinery, all painted in shades of deep gray and black. The train was dead still. "Are you kidding me?" she whispered into the thick silence, her voice unnaturally loud. "Why are we stopping here?" A wave of unease washed over her. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. She walked down the aisle, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "Hello?" she called out. "Is anyone there? Conductor?" Only silence answered. The coach was utterly, completely vacant. She was the only soul in this long, fluorescent-lit tube stranded in a sea of darkness. The familiar sounds of the city were gone, replaced by an oppressive quiet, broken only by the occasional groan of the train settling and the frantic thumping of her own heart. She checked her phone. 12:30 a.m. The time glowed ominously in the dark. No service. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. Clutching her leather purse so tightly her knuckles turned white, she pressed her face against the cool glass, trying to pierce the impenetrable darkness outside, feeling a primal fear she hadn't known since childhood. She was isolated, cut off, and 1,000 city blocks from home. The silence was playing tricks on her. It had to be. Every faint creak of the train's body sounded like a footstep. Every hum from the dormant engine felt like a whisper. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, and Amelia jumped, her hand flying to her chest. She needed to hear a familiar voice, to anchor herself to reality. She held her phone up, moving it slowly around the coach, praying for a single bar of signal. Finally, in one spot near the rear door, a single bar flickered to life. Her fingers trembled as she dialed her husband, Ben. It rang twice before his sleepy, concerned voice came on. "Amelia, you okay?" "Hey, honey," she said, trying to sound normal but hearing the tight strain in her own voice. "I'm going to be late." The train stopped. It's not at a station. It's just stopped somewhere before Oakwood. "Where are you? Is anyone else there?" Ben's voice was instantly alert. "The coach is empty," she admitted, the words sounding more frightening out loud. "Everyone got off. I don't see the conductor or anyone. I'll call you as soon as I get to the station, I promise." "Okay, just be careful. The second you're at Oakwood, get a cab. Don't even think about walking." "I love you." Love you too, Baba, don't worry. She ended the call, the term of endearment feeling like a fragile charm against the growing dread. The moment the screen went dark, the feeling returned, stronger and more suffocating than before. It was a visceral, skin-crawling sensation, the unshakable certainty that she was not alone, that someone or something was standing at the far end of the aisle watching her. She could feel the weight of a gaze. She didn't dare turn around. Her breath hitched in her throat. Get a grip, Amelia. It's just your imagination. You're tired and stressed. But her instincts, the ancient, reptilian part of her brain, screamed otherwise. Thinking of a horror movie she'd once seen, she fumbled with her phone, opening the front-facing camera. Holding it up as if taking a selfie, she slowly panned it around, using the small screen as a mirror to see behind her. The screen showed the empty rows of blue fabric seats, the rack for luggage above them, the posters for gum and lawyers, nothing. She let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish. See, She panned the camera a little further to the left, and then she saw it. A dark, human-shaped blur in the very last seat, a shadow that was denser than the others. It was there for only a fraction of a second, a stark, black silhouette against the window, and then it was gone. It didn't move. It simply vanished. A cold sweat instantly drenched her, plastering her blouse to her back. Her face lost all its color. With a gasp, she spun around, her eyes desperately scanning the back of the coach. It was empty. Completely empty. The seat where the shadow had been was vacant, bathed in the same sterile light as all the others. "Hello?" she called out, her voice a thin, reedy thread. No answer. The air itself felt heavy and cold. Rational thought told her it was a trick of the light, a reflection, her exhausted mind conjuring phantoms. But the primal, terrified animal inside her knew the truth. Something was on the train with her, and it was hiding. The sudden, deafening blast of the train's horn made her scream. It was followed by a series of metallic clunks and a deep, vibrating shudder that ran through the entire length of the carriage. The lights flickered again, and for a heart-stopping second, Amelia was plunged into total darkness before they buzzed back on, dimmer than before. The train was moving. A sob of pure, unadulterated relief escaped her lips. She clung to a pole as the train began to crawl forward, its wheels screeching in protest, as if reluctant to leave this cursed spot. She didn't care about the noise. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. It was movement. It was progress. It was escape. "Please," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside, now sliding past the window. "Just get to the station. Please don't stop again." She remained standing by the door, her body tensed like a spring, her purse held like a weapon. Her eyes remained locked on the back of the coach, on that last seat, expecting the shadow to reappear at any moment. But nothing moved. The only thing that changed was the world outside, which gradually began to show pinpricks of distant city lights, then the closer, warmer lights of backyards and streets. They were re-entering the world of the living. When the train finally, gracefully, slid into the brightly lit cavern of Oakwood Station, Amelia felt like she could finally breathe. The doors hissed open and she practically fell onto the platform, stumbling in her haste. The cold night air was a blessing on her feverish skin. The platform was deserted. It was past 1 a.m. now, but it was a public open space. It felt like sanctuary. She started walking, her heels clicking a rapid staccato rhythm on the concrete. The sound echoed off the high ceiling. Click, clack, click, clack. But underneath, almost perfectly synced, was another set. Step shuffle, step shuffle. She froze mid-step. The second set of footsteps took one more step. The sound of a shoe scuffing concrete, and then they too stopped. The blood in Amelia's veins turned to ice. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was behind her. Very close. Her body went rigid with fear. She couldn't turn around. She couldn't move. "Run!" the command screamed in her mind. She broke into a sprint, no longer caring about the noise, her bag banging against her hip. And instantly, the other set of footsteps mirrored her own, a frantic, pounding echo right on her heels. They weren't just following. They were chasing. She could almost feel the breath on her neck. With a desperate, terrified cry, she skidded to a halt and whirled around, raising her arms to defend herself. The platform was empty. There was no one there. No one running, no one hiding behind a pillar, no one at all. The long, lit platform stretched out, completely vacant. Her own ragged breaths were the only sound. The feeling of being pursued vanished, replaced by a profound, disorienting confusion. Had she lost her mind? Was the stress causing auditory hallucinations? But the sound had been so real, so tangible. Shaking uncontrollably, she turned back toward the exit. Her journey not even half over. The only way out was through the tunnel. The pedestrian tunnel was the stuff of urban legends, a necessary but dreaded part of the Oakwood Station's layout. It burrowed under the active train tracks, a long, tiled passage that was perpetually damp and poorly maintained. During the day, it was merely unpleasant. At 1:15 in the morning, after what she had just experienced, it was the mouth of hell. Amelia stood at its entrance, her courage completely evaporating. The first few yards were lit by a flickering orange sodium light, but beyond that, the tunnel curved and plunged into an absolute pitch-black darkness. A cold, damp breeze carrying the smell of mildew and decay wafted out, caressing her face like a corpse's hand. She looked back. The empty platform offered no solace. She looked for another exit, a staircase, anything. There was nothing. Her phone had no signal down here. Ben was waiting. Her warm, safe home was on the other side. This tunnel was the only path. Tears of frustration and fear welled in her eyes. Get a grip, she chanted to herself. Her voice a desperate whisper. She fumbled with her phone, her fingers numb with terror, and activated the flashlight. The beam was pitifully weak, a tiny cone of light that did little more than illuminate the cracked tiles at her feet, making the surrounding darkness seem even more profound. She took a step inside, then another. Her every footfall echoed, click, clack, but the tunnel distorted the sound, bouncing it back at her from all directions, making it seem like a crowd was walking with her. Click, clack, scuff, click. She held the phone out, the beam shaking violently with the tremor in her hand. It illuminated graffiti-scarred walls and a ceiling stained with ancient water leaks. About 50 feet in, the last of the ambient light from the entrance vanished. She was now entirely encased in darkness, with only her fragile phone light to push it back. The air grew colder, and then a new sound joined the symphony of her fear. It was a soft, muffled crying. Amelia stopped dead. The crying continued, a high, childish, utterly heartbroken sound. It was a little girl sobbing as if her world had ended. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, swirling in the damp air around her. "Who's there?" Amelia called out, her voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped instantly. The silence that followed was a physical weight, pressing in on her from all sides. It was a listening silence. She forced her legs to move, one step, then two. The beam of her light danced across the walls, and then she saw it, a small, dark figure standing motionless in a recessed doorway about 20 feet ahead. A little girl in an old-fashioned, dark-colored dress, her head bowed, her face hidden by a curtain of hair. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Hey, are you lost?" she asked, her maternal instinct briefly overpowering her terror. The girl didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply raised one pale, small hand and pointed directly at Amelia. Then she was gone. Not running, not moving. She simply dissolved into the shadows of the doorway. Amelia stood frozen, her mind refusing to process what she had just seen. This was no hallucination. This was something else, something ancient and wrong. The tunnel was no longer just a place. It was a threshold, and she was an unwanted intruder. Paralysis held Amelia in its icy grip. To go forward was to walk into the space where the girl had been. To go back was to return, to the empty platform and the train that might still be waiting. Neither option was safe. The air grew so cold she could see her own, panicked breaths forming plumes of mist. In the phone's light, the smell of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like old blood, filled her nostrils. And then the whisper came. It didn't come from ahead or behind. It seemed to originate inside her own mind, a thought that wasn't her own.
"Help me."
It was a child's voice, thin and frayed, filled with a bottomless sorrow. It was the same voice from the sobs. Terror reached a crescendo inside her. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. An idea, a last desperate gambit born from her earlier experience on the train, sparked in her mind. The camera, the front-facing camera, it had shown her the shadow when her own eyes could not. With trembling, almost useless fingers, she swiped and tapped, opening the camera app. She switched it to video, her thumb hovering over the record button. She didn't point it forward. Instead, she held the phone up, screen facing her, and used it as a mirror, slowly panning it around her, scanning the darkness she couldn't see with her own eyes. The screen showed her own terrified, pale face, the stark light from below creating ghastly shadows under her eyes. It showed the glistening tunnel walls behind her. It showed the empty space to her left and right. And then, as she panned it to the space directly behind her, she saw. The little girl was there. Not 20 feet away, but right behind her. So close that if Amelia took a step back, she would touch her. Her head was still bowed, her long, lank hair obscuring her features. She was wearing a faded blue dress with a small, torn lace collar. One of her white socks was fallen around her ankle. Amelia's blood turned to ice water. A silent scream locked in her throat. Her eyes, fixed on the phone screen, were wide with abject horror. In the screen, the little girl slowly began to raise her head. Amelia couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from the dreadful reflection. The hair fell away from the girl's face. There were no eyes, just dark, empty sockets that held a universe of pain. Her skin was pale and waxy, and then her lips, thin and blue, parted. "He left me here," the ghostly child whispered, the sound echoing both in the tunnel and inside Amelia's skull. "No one ever found me. Help me find my way home." In that moment, the terror didn't vanish, but it transformed. The malevolent presence she had felt was not one of evil, but of profound loss. This wasn't a monster. This was a tragedy frozen in time, finding a shred of courage she didn't know she possessed. Amelia, still watching the screen, whispered, "I see you. I will remember you." A single shimmering tear of ectoplasm traced a path down the girl's chalky cheek in the reflection, and then she began to fade, dissolving into a million motes of light that swirled for a moment in the cold air before winking out of existence. The oppressive cold lifted. The dreadful presence was gone. The tunnel was just a tunnel again, damp, dark, and unpleasant, but no longer haunted. Amelia ran. She ran as she had never run before, bursting out of the far end of the tunnel and into the parking lot, where she collapsed, sobbing onto the curb. A cab, sent by a worried Ben after her call dropped hours earlier, found her there minutes later. The next morning, wrapped in a blanket on her sofa, she searched the local archives online. It took hours, but she found it. A cold case from 15 years ago. Lily Peterson, age 8, the article read, next to a smiling school photo. She had vanished on the 11:45 p.m. Express from Chicago after a trip with her grandmother. Her body was discovered a week later in a drainage ditch near the old industrial rail line, not far from where Amelia's train had stopped. The case had gone cold, a forgotten file in a dusty drawer. No one had ever been caught. Conclusion. Amelia's story teaches us a profound and chilling lesson. Fear is often a messenger for stories that have been left untold. The presence that followed her wasn't a demon, but a lost soul, a fragment of a forgotten tragedy crying out for acknowledgement. Her experience reminds us that the world is layered, that the past often bleeds into the present, and that the most terrifying encounters are not with beings that wish to harm us, but with those who are trapped, asking only to be seen, to be remembered, and finally, to find their way home. It reminds us to trust our instincts, for they perceive realities our rational minds dismiss, and to always carry compassion, even into the darkest of places.